Hey, good morning. If you're coming on, that's great. We're just getting started here. We'll be going in a few minutes, so if you get a chance, you can drop us a note into the Q&A. It's on the right-hand side there. You can access that. Drop in, say hello, let us know where you're from, anything you're excited to hear about this morning. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll be starting in about 8 minutes. Hey, good morning again. If you're here with us already, that's fantastic. I see we've got a few attendees. The live event's going to start in about 5 minutes. Happy to see we have some people jumping in on the questions and answers already, letting us know where you're from. Welcome from Long Island City, New York. Very glad to have you here. Shout out to our friends up north in Canada, featuring Connecticut, our favorites in Chicago and Charlotte, North Carolina, rounding that out. If you get a chance, jump into the chat. Let us know where you're from and anything you're excited to hear about today. So again, we got about 5 minutes to go. More people keep coming in as we go here every minute. So we'll be starting in a few minutes. Thanks. Hey, good morning. If you're here with us early, just want to let you know we're just getting ready to roll. This will be starting here in just a couple minutes. Great to see people checking in the chat. Looks like we got a friend in from Madison. That's awesome. Welcome. If you are just clicking in, that's great. You can let us know where you're coming from. Just jump into the chat feature there and Let us know where you're from, and if you got any questions, we're looking forward to a great session here in just a couple minutes. So hang with us as we get everybody else on the line, and we'll be right back with you. Thanks. Hey, good morning. If you're here with us early, that's fantastic. Thanks for jumping onto this call. We're getting ready to start here in just a couple minutes. Happy to have you all here with us this morning. We're going to get started again in just a couple minutes, but hey, thanks to our friend from Houston. I see lots of rain, but still afloat. We're glad you're here with us. If you get a chance, jump into the Q&A. Just give us a shout out. Let us know where you're from. If you got any questions you want to start off with, you can throw them in there too. We've got time for that. At the end of the presentation. We're looking forward to a great day with Tom Latourette here from M3 Learning. He's going to share some really great content for you. Hang with us just a couple more minutes and we're going to get ready to start. Thanks. Hey, we're almost about ready to start. We still got some people coming in, so thanks for joining us a little bit early. We appreciate that. We're gonna get rolling here in just a couple minutes. See people checking in as we go. If you get a chance and you want to say hello to us before we get started here, you can jump into the chat again, say hello, let us know where you're from. Glad to hear everybody. The Twin Cities is checking in, and we got Cincinnati, so that's fantastic. So we're going to get going here in just a couple minutes. Hang with us, and we'll get some great content and have a good conversation here this morning. So thanks for joining us early. We'll be with you in just a second. Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. Really appreciate it. I'm Matt Buckley, and it's my privilege to represent GPA as we join M3 Learning in a conversation about simplifying sales strategies. Many of us here at GPA have been fortunate recently to spend time with our great partners in the print community discussing markets and applications in a COVID world. These conversations almost always led to a discussion about sales strategies. In response, we've brought our friend Tom Latourette, who is the managing partner of M3 Learning, here today to share some of what he's taught us at GPA regarding prospecting, opportunities, and sales calls. M3 Learning is a worldwide sales consulting firm that has coached thousands of sales teams from Fortune 100 companies to mid-market firms and entrepreneurial startups. Tom brings a unique real-world perspective with over 30 years of marketing, sales, and sales management experience. As we go through today's conversation, you'll be able to comment or ask questions using the chat feature. We've scheduled time at the end of this presentation to answer questions. So now let's bring Tom onto the call so he can share with us how to implement actionable strategies for a profitable and meaningful sales cycle. Hey, good morning, Tom.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? You can hear me okay and everything?
Yeah, you sound great. Thanks for being here with us today.
And I am so excited. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this conversation today. As you mentioned, first off, thanks for the great introduction. As you mentioned, M3 and GPA have been friends and partners for, I think it's over 15 years now. Your folks have actually gone through a lot of our programs, and we've become not only business friends, but also personal friends. And I'm just excited. Thank you guys so much for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. And so, and I'd also like to thank, because I know, Matt, we asked the group that is here, we asked many of them to fill out, and there was a part of a questionnaire that we had asked folks to fill out. We got quite a few answers. And so, in today's conversation, we're really going to address some of the issues that were brought up, not only issues that we're seeing in the marketplace, but issues that were brought up by the customers, your customers who are actually on this call. And so I want to highlight just a few of those things that we're going to talk about today. Probably the first and maybe most important is in a pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever we want to call, whatever, pre-recovery, whatever we're at, right? Pipelines are really thin. We're not only hearing that in the print industry, we're hearing that in a bunch of industries that we work with, Not only if I'm a salesperson today, a sales leader today, I'm thinking about Q4, but I'm also really worried about Q1 and Q2 in 2021, right? Where's that business going to come from? The other thing, I was talking to one of your customers last week as I was preparing for this program, and prospecting is difficult. Nobody likes it. In my mind, prospecting sucks. Nobody likes to do it, right? And for those of us who are salespeople, nobody loves it, right? And the comment this guy made, his name is John, and I think he's on this call. John said, prospecting today is ridiculously challenging. I thought, oh, John, can I use that for my presentation next week? Because I think it's perfect. It really describes ridiculously challenging. John was telling me a story about a customer that he's working with. They need his stuff. I mean, they significantly need his product, and it's going to solve a big printing problem for them. And he couldn't get in the organization. They wouldn't even let him come through the front door. So his contact had to meet him in the parking lot. And so here he's literally, it's like old school, right? And let me show you what I got in my trunk. And here you go. Here's the solution. Good. That sounds great, And then I think what we're challenged by is this, what I call this new normal. This right now, what we're in, Matt, is the new normal. This is the conversation that as a salesperson, I got to master. I got to be able to have this conversation over Zoom, over Teams, over the internet, whatever that looks and feels like. When I used to be doing this in person, I thank you for the introduction and letting everybody know that I've been 30 plus years in this business, right? I started when I was 10. So those of you who take a look at me, you can say, wow, he really looks young for doing this. But for a lot of us, the good news is we've got a lot of experience and we've been doing this for a long time and we've had success. The bad news is we have a lot of experience and we've been doing this for a long time. And it's easy to get set in your ways. And I think that's one of the challenges. We have to pivot. I talked to another customer, Dean, about a week and a half ago. And the word he used was pivot, this place of how do I get out of my own way? And I think that's a challenge. So we're going to talk about some strategies and some tactics for that. One of the other things that I've heard from industries, but also specifically in the print industry, is this place of collaboration is critical. In order for me to get in front of the people that I need to talk to when I'm prospecting, I'm going to have to rely on the contacts that I make, but I'm also going to have to rely on other people either in my organization or even maybe my peers, right, to help me get in front of the right people. This place of, like, if I've got a technical support person, a inside sales person, hey, do you have a relationship with this account? Because I need to talk to somebody there. It's very tenuous if we only have one or two relationships in a company. We've got to really branch out inside the companies that we're working with. John, when I was talking with John, again, I'm going to reference John's conversation I had. He said, great quote, just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's not happening. And as a salesperson today, I think what's interesting is we can think we're involved in the conversation, but all of a sudden for 2 or 3 weeks, we're not talking to somebody, and the whole world can change in our customers' business, right? They can a lot of things can be happening, and we're just not aware of what's going on. So the more contacts we have and the deeper and wider we're in those companies, the better. The other thing we're going to talk about is this place of, one of the things we teach is yeses are great, Matt, nos are great, but maybes will kill you. Maybes will kill an organization. We want to help people qualify and disqualify earlier. There is nothing wrong with a no, because a no is really just a not now. But I would much rather know that I want to help people I want to make it easy for them to say no to me so I can move on to something else, right? And the last thing we're going to talk about is this place of my salespeople, and especially in an industry like yours, the print industry. It's easy for us to be very technical and to talk what we'll call a BTL language, the features and benefits, speeds and feeds. But we've got to get really good at speaking above the line, this ATL at the ownership level, the VP level, all of that. So Matt, that's what I plan on talking about today. And anything else we need to add? Anything you want to add from a color standpoint before we get started?
Yeah, it's just such a great lineup of information we're about to share here. So we really appreciate that. You know, it's interesting. We love the idea that it's ridiculously challenging. We certainly all feel that, but the communication challenge, I think, is the big one. And I know we're going to talk about this as we go to the next slide, really this need that you have to master social media and these virtual platforms, including knowing your product and having ATL, BTL conversations. So you want to share with us a little bit about that?
So let's address prospecting first. You know, I think that's really the first place everybody says is, okay, I need to master prospecting. And so one of the first things we say is you've got to really come into this with a different mindset, okay? There's a joke I like to tell. There's 2 salespeople who are selling shoes to nudist colonies. Now that's a tough challenge, right? But so if I'm a shoe salesperson and these shoe salespeople, they both call home that night. First person calls home and says, honey, I don't know what to tell you. This is going to be ridiculously challenging. There is none of these nudists wear shoes. Heck, most of them don't even wear pants. You know, the other salesperson calls home and says, honey, this is fantastic. Nobody's wearing shoes. My marketplace is unlimited, right? I think we have to look at COVID kind of that way. This is a place that's going to prove the mettle of some folks. Now, whether we look at it and go, holy cow, I'm going to innovate, I'm going to get out of my way, I'm going to pivot, I'm going to do the things I need to do to make something happen. Either I'm going to do that or I'm going to curl up in the fetal position and I'm going to go, oh, I hope things get back to normal. There is no normal anymore, right? The new normal is this. And so for at least the next 12 to 18 months, we've got to be thinking relational versus transactional. I think that's a big piece. That's the first piece on our slide is we've got to stop thinking as salespeople that we're going in and creating a transaction. Our recommendation is you go in and you be somebody who is helpful. You help somebody solve a problem. Make it about them. How do I create a relationship? Maybe a prospecting call is as simple as, Matt, how you doing? How's your company doing in terms of all this? What are you guys working on? What problems are you trying to overcome? And you don't come into there with a solution. You just come in basically what we call a check-in with value. You try to listen to hear some places where you can be of value. And whether that's something that you can help sell them, or even something as simple as, I'm going to introduce you to somebody who can help you. I hear you're having an accounting problem. I hear you're having a problem that maybe you need to speak to a lawyer. I've got somebody in my network that I can introduce you to. And so that next piece on this slide is this place of social. How do I use this powerful tool called LinkedIn? How do I use it to research the people that I'm talking to? How do I use it to build rapport at a really high level? What I'm trying to do is before I have a meeting, I'm looking on LinkedIn to see, who does this person know? What are they passionate about? What are they excited about? What's the rapport pieces that I can turn a cold call into a warm call? The last thing is kind of what I talked about earlier, this place of reciprocity. Matt, have you ever seen the movie The Godfather?
Absolutely. Love that one.
Great movie. There's a great scene in The Godfather where the Godfather's got the cat in his hand and it's his son's wedding, right? And the guy comes over and says, Godfather, I need you to take care of this guy for me. He's done me wrong. And the Godfather says, Matt, I will take care of that for you. But I would hope that one day you would remember this kindness that I have bestowed upon you, and you will do me an equal favor at some point, right? The law of reciprocity works that way. If I can help you during a time when you need help, you're going to remember that. And we are wired as human beings to want to repay that favor. And so relationships today are currency, and your ability to connect folks and help others, be a referral source, is actually going to create a place where people are going to want to refer you. Does that make sense, Matt?
Totally. I love that relationships are currency. That's everything right there.
It's a powerful statement. I really want people to think like that, okay? The other thing is this place of virtual. We have to master this virtual world. I'm still talking to salespeople who are saying, oh, I've never done a Zoom call. Shame on you. You need to either do Zoom, GoToMeeting, Teams, whatever that is. Matt, I don't know if I've shared this with you yet, but because we've done a few of these conversations. I was on a webinar last week, and this guy was talking about his company. And last year in 2019, they had 2.3 million minutes on Zoom of their team, okay? So they're a big organization, a lot of Zoom time. He said that in August, just 4 weeks ago, they had 9 million minutes in 1 month. If you had bought Zoom, I mean, Zoom's been around for 5-6 years. If you had bought Zoom stock a year ago, it was, I think, 2030. It's over 200. It's crazy, right? People are using this technology to have conversations that they used to have in person, and that is not happening. And I'm still hearing salespeople go, oh, when things get back to normal, that's when I'll have my conversations. You cannot think like that anymore. This is the new reality for 2020 and beyond. Matt, anything you want to add before we move on to this?
Yeah, great points. And I think we feel the same way. The check-ins with value, especially early on, that was amazing. People are open to really having discussions that I think if you didn't take advantage of that then, you're a little behind on opportunity to really create some friendships and relationships. And I think LinkedIn is the big surprise. We have, top performing members of our team. It's not just daily, it's hourly. Yeah. They're on LinkedIn making connections. And I think it's really led to some new opportunities. But mostly what you said that just catches me is that people are just so more open now to having these conversations than ever. So,
what's interesting, I think, is, a lot of folks look at something like LinkedIn and they go, oh, it's so impersonal. But the reality is you can make it personal. GPA is you guys do a great job. You're posting videos, you're posting articles, and I'm sure you're finding that people are responding, and literally you're having a conversation, much like you would have if you were in person. The other really important thing is, and I talked a little bit about this, is how you use it to build rapport. So as I was preparing for my presentation with you, Matt, I did a little bit of LinkedIn research. I Googled you, I stalked you a little bit. I found a few places where we've got some similarities that I want to address. Not so much the Army Navy thing, even though I'm a big football fan. It seems like you're a big Navy guy. I would not want to talk about Army with you, right? You're a motorcycle guy, but here's where I think you and I are going to be long-lasting friends. You're a whiskey drinker. How about some Pappy? I don't know if you're a Pappy fan, but we do my brother and I have a charity golf outing where every year we have a Pappy Van Winkle tasting. I'm going to invite you to this year's event. You in for it?
I will attend that event right after I change my Facebook profile settings so that those are some great pictures.
Yeah, so they're some good pictures. So definitely this place of when I'm getting ready to have a conversation, just do a little bit of research and find out where are the places where we can build rapport. All of a sudden, Matt and I are connected at a different level when we have a glass of Pappy together, right? So that's prospecting. The piece of how do I get better at prospecting. Now this place of the place we're coaching a lot of folks on is how do I change my philosophy? So instead of managing the quote unquote deals, I'm managing the stages of the deals. So this next slide really talks about here's how we typically prospect and we get new business. We go out, we prospect, then we go and we do what we call a discovery session. Now, here's where I'm going to challenge most people. Most salespeople go, oh yeah, I'm really good at discovery, when in fact, we probably are better at showing up and throwing up. Let me tell you how great I am. Let me tell you all about me, blah, blah, blah. And we confuse asking questions with, oh yeah, listen, I hope you don't mind. I've told you a lot about me, but let me ask you, what do you think about me? That's not a discovery question, right? The key is we've got to find. So most of the time we do this thing we call discovery, and it's not really discovery. Then we make a proposal, and then we get into harassment mode. And harassment mode sometimes can last for weeks and months. We're going to recommend that we switch this up and we stop thinking about the seller's process and we think about the buyer's process. And so I don't know if you've got 4 steps, 8 steps, 10 steps, but whatever those steps are. And for those of you who are on this call, I would highly recommend that one of the first things you do is you map out your buyer's journey and you think about your best customers and how did they interact with you and what did they do in each one of those stages. So stage 1 is initial interest. The customer doesn't even know what they don't know. They're starting to ask questions. Ideally, this is the best place for a salesperson to get involved because the earlier I can be in there, the stronger I'm going to be. The next place is education. Now the customer has asked their questions and they want to be educated. There's this place of, okay, tell me what you got. The next place, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, is most organizations miss this. And it's called transfer of ownership. I'm going to go a little deeper into that later. Then once I emotionally make a commitment, I then try to rationalize it with the other side of my brain, right? And then I make a decision. So most people go through some process like this when they're making any purchasing decisions. Matt, this makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so here's what we see happen, though. This next slide is really important. There's 3 things that happen in the buyer's process that I want to make sure we spend some time talking about. The first place is, you see where that X is, Matt? It's in education, right? That tends to be where most people start us as salespeople in the conversation. And I'm sure you guys at GPA have heard this same thing. Most folks, they'll say something like, yeah, I already know what you guys do. You do the labels and you do, yeah, I get it. I've used you before. What's your price? And they start us at education, or what makes you different? What's your price? What makes you different? I already know. And so there's this place of, as salespeople, that's how we're trained. So we're trained to jump right into that water and, well, let me tell you, here's how we're different. We're blah, blah, blah. We do this, we do this. Our substrates are this. And so we get into this technical conversation, right? And the customer pushes us there and we lovingly and knowingly jump in. Again, when you look at, you're from marketing, you know that we're providing a lot of data to the customer ahead of time. They know more about us many times than we know about them. So the challenge as a salesperson is, I have to be really aware that I've got to jump back into stage 1. Yes, I'm ready to talk to you about why we're different. I can give you a price immediately, but I've got a few questions I want to ask first. Do you have a few minutes? I definitely need to ask you this question or this question, and you get into a discovery mode. We're going to talk more about this. Secondly, there's this thing we call the split. It's this technical conversation and this buyer's conversation, the ownership level conversation. I have to be really good at speaking both of those languages. That's called the split. And then there's this place of the skip. We got to make sure that we don't jump over transfer of ownership. So this slide here, Matt, is really encompassing what I want to talk about today. Any questions? Any thoughts on this? Perfect. Are you a roller coaster fan, Matt?
I love roller coasters.
Cedar Point. You've been to Cedar Point?
Oh, yes. OHIO.
Oh my! It's probably the greatest place for roller coasters. For those of you who are roller coasters, the sales process is like getting on a roller coaster. You know those moments, Matt, where you're sitting in the seat and it takes all this energy and this time, and you're getting up to the top, and you know there's a lot of energy that's being expended making sure you get up to the top of that hill. And then once you're at the top and you look over and you go, the first thought is, holy cow, this is scary, right? But then once you go over that hill, it's all free sailing. The inertia of all that energy is what propels you over the top, right? It's just like in sales. All of our energy, if we really want to close deals stronger, we've got to put a lot of our energy on the front end of that. In your discovery session, making sure that I have, well, one, I got to prospect really powerfully. Two, I got to have great discovery. And three is this place of when I educate, I have to have a two-way education. And so if I create that, that allows me to really close more deals. And so the thing we try to teach is energy is created by the buyer's motivation. And so Matt, I want to ask you a question. Buyers, so if we can go to the next slide, because I think this next slide really talks about this place of buyers make a buying decision either away from pain or towards pleasure. What do you say that percentage is? How many, what percentage buy away from pain and what percentage buy towards pleasure?
I'm going to go that it's split 50-50.
Yeah, so that's a typical answer. I'm surprised because you're from marketing. Most of the time, marketing folks will say, oh, it's 70% towards pleasure because it's newer, greater, shinier, whatever. The reality is towards pleasure is want to have, away from pain is need to have. Matt, I'm aware you've purchased a new vehicle recently, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so when you think about this away from pain and towards pleasure, I'm sure you were looking at the vehicle and you were like, oh, okay, I like this car, I'd like this. And did you go through that whole process of trying to figure out what you were going to purchase, right?
Correct.
Okay. What finally made you make the decision, from in getting a new car? If you really think about why I needed this new car, what was happening in your life that had you make that decision?
I had to move a dresser.
Interesting, right? Like, so here you're going to make a $30,000+ decision based on something that you're like, well, I've got to make this activity, and I can't use my old vehicle to do that, right? There's a difference between I want to buy a new car. I've got a car on our driveway that's got about 170,000 miles on it. We've been talking for the last year and a half about getting a new vehicle. We've been starting to do some research. All of a sudden the transmission goes bad. And now I have to have a conversation because I don't want to spend another $3,000, $4,000 on that car because I think I need to. So there's a difference between I want to have it and I need to have it. So here's the recommendation I would make. This next slide about customers are trying to solve problems. I want everybody on this call to think CSP. Your job is to find the problem that the customer needs to solve, not wants to solve, but needs to solve. What are they trying to stop? What are they trying to bring an end to? What do they need to minimize? What do they need to keep down? What do they need to reduce? What do they need? What situation is stressing them out that they need to avoid, that they need to keep clear of? That's where the sales energy is. What problem is the customer trying to solve? In my conversation with Dean a week ago, he made a great point. He's like, we got to stop selling solutions. We got to stop selling stuff. We got to start selling solutions to these problems. And so that's the place. You've got to find the problem that the customer is having. And so the next slide really has 5 places that we've got to get good at. 1, If we don't know the problem, we can't solve them. So our questioning has to be, tell me about the problems you're having. And I'm going to give the team here a really good tool to have that happen, right? The other key thing is there's a difference between me telling you you're having a problem and you verbalizing that problem to me. So my place is I've got to get you to speak it. I've got to get you to own that problem and tell me what it is. Now, it may take me to drill down and ask some really strong questions to make that happen, because most of the time I might not be that comfortable telling you that on a first level, maybe a first conversation. But our job as salespeople is we've got to drill down. The third place is I've got to get the client to state the problem from a sense of urgency standpoint. Once I find out that you need to move a dresser, and the reason you need to move it now versus 2 months from now is because you're moving into a new place, there's a completely different level sense of urgency. Agree, Matt?
Yes.
Last two things I want people to think about is we've got to understand that at different levels of an organization, there are different problems. And so our job is to understand all the problems at all levels of the organization. And then maybe the most important thing is I have to quantify that problem. I've got to quantify it from a cost standpoint. I've got to quantify it from a time standpoint. I've got to quantify it from a pain in the ass standpoint, right? And if I quantify that, then that's going to allow me to really put some energy and some meat into the solution. Matt, any of these resonating with you and GPA?
Yeah, we love this slide, Tom. So again, I think this is one of the first ones, that this is really a tool. We should hold on to this slide when we're out there making calls and thinking about the process that we're in. But quantify for us. I mean, one of our examples we've shared with you as we were preparing this, we had went into a large retailer. They had a problem with a label that just wasn't sticking, for whatever reason, wasn't sticking, and it was falling off. And, as we looked through this, and I, shout out to our team members who stuck with this and worked so hard and drilled down, really comes to it's not really about the label. It really became about the labor that this retailer was spending across the country that was totaling over 7 figures a year in just picking up labels off the floor. So when you start to drill down and quantify those things, I think not only do you build like a better relationship and partnership, but we're not in that conversation about what's your price. Now we're in this conversation about, how we can help you solve all your problems.
You go from a label issue to a labor issue, and all of a sudden you're not talking about a transaction of, oh yeah, let me show you how my labels are going to be better than these labels and they're all going to stick. There's a conversation of labor is one of the biggest issues that anybody in the print industry is dealing with right now. I've got a problem hiring folks. I've got a problem keeping folks. I've got a problem. And so how do I make sure that that happens? So the way to do that is have what I call powerful first dates. And so, Matt, there's a difference between a first date where I come in and I say, hey, let me tell you all about me. I already know you're the type of person who you like this, this, and this. So, let's say I was meeting somebody for the first time and I'm like, listen, I know you're looking for a guy who's really, financially secure. Here's my checkbook. Here, let me show you how much money I've got in the bank. Or let me show you all the trophies that I've earned. And here's physically fit. Here's how great I am. Here's all of my test scores. We would never start a first date like that in a place of, let me tell you all about me, 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 me. Would you agree with that, Matt? Or at least, if we want to have, get past the entree, we want to get to entree and get past appetizer. Matt, if you think about a first date, what are the 2 objectives of a first date?
Well, I think we're trying to qualify, see if we want a second date.
Yeah. So the first place is, do I want to invest time in this person to have a second date? What's the second objective?
I don't know. What is the second objective?
In order for me to do that, I want to get to know about you, right? So really my objective is I got to get to know about you so that I can determine whether it makes sense for us to have a second date. Because listen, you might be a serial killer who, is a hoarder that, is a stalker. Maybe I don't want to have a second date with you, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. The only way I can get to that is by asking great questions. So instead, if I spend all of my time talking about you, there's no way that I'm ever going to learn about, or talking about me, there's no way I'm going to learn about you, right? So I know that's a simple explanation from a personal standpoint, but here's what I want to challenge everybody on this call. I want you to look at your website. I want you to look at your slide decks. And the first time you're meeting somebody, if you come up and say something like, let me tell you how many locations we've got, and here's our case studies, and here's our list of satisfied customers, and here's about here's my executive team. And you don't get to the customer's needs and objectives till slide 10, you just need to flip that. So the key thing is, in a discovery conversation, it's all about asking, and here's a list of 6 great questions you can go in and ask. What's the cause for you to even have this conversation? What's causing you to even allow me to come in and have a conversation with you? What results are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to change? What's going on in your business? What's the urgency to achieve those results? Got it. What's the impact, payback, or return that's expected? So I got to drill down and start asking, what do you expect in this new solution? I love this question. This might be my favorite question of all. What are the consequences if you do nothing and you stay at the current state? I believe one of the biggest things that's holding a lot of our customers back, especially in the print industry, is just the way I've always done it, the status quo. I'm afraid to do something different, right? I don't really, you think this digital revolution is going to stay? I'm pretty good with offset. You go, stop it. There's a whole new world in front of you, right? Lastly, you got to ask, what are the available resources or means to achieve these results? And I want to understand, what are the risks that are inherent here? Matt, when you think about GPA, which one of these, or which ones of these do you spend a lot of time diving into?
Tom, this is one of my favorite slides, and I love spending time with you because I always pick up different things every time we go through this. Mostly, I think to myself, oh yeah, I do that wrong. But this one, every time I see it, just 6 easy questions. This is a tool. I mean, this is a tool we just gave to everybody that, we should all print out and use, right?
Well, I was going to say that, and we didn't make this comment. We should have. We'll be sending this a PDF of this slide deck to everybody who's on this. So I want to, thank everybody for attending. So you don't need to take, screenshots of this, and we'll make sure we send it to you. So the next slide really talks about why this is critical. The key thing is, discovery is all about helping us be on the offensive versus the defensive, right? I talked earlier about this. The earlier we're involved, the better. The last thing we want is, you understand, we're already in a defensive posture if the customer says, well, I'm already using these guys as my printer. And so the place is, okay, great, I understand that. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about your business, about what you're doing, what your challenges are? So even if they put you on the defensive, the key thing is, bring it back and go into discovery mode, right? Don't go in and say, well, let me tell you why I'm better about blah, 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 this. No, let me ask you a few questions about your business. So you're trying to find ways that maybe you can support them that their existing printer isn't, right? If you can guide the shops who've never used your digital technology or your solution before. So now all of a sudden, this place of focusing on the solution and not the stuff allows us to be a partner or a consultant versus a salesperson. And I love this last bullet because I think this is absolutely critical. It's awfully hard to switch specs. It's hard when you have a loyal relationship with an existing vendor. It's really tough to switch that out. Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah, we face that all the time. I'm sure it's one of the most common things in sales, right? It's hard to switch, and really, unless there's an issue, you're having a discussion about price, because you said in the beginning, relationship is currency. And if you're in there in the beginning and you've established a relationship, and I know you get a little further on in this, and we talk about champions and how we put people into places. But yeah, we want to definitely stay on the offensive here.
Okay, so this here is all of, I want to finish up this conversation about discovery. And, so we've gone prospecting. We've really talked about this first stage of discovery. Now, here's the other stage where I see a lot of sales teams miss it. And this is a critically important stage. It's what I call the test drive. And so the next slide shows an example of the power of the test drive. And so, Matt, you just recently bought a new car, right?
Right.
The test drive. Did the salesperson say to you, hey, Matt, we're going to take a test drive. Let me do this. Let me put you in the passenger seat, and I'm going to show you how this baby handles. It goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I'm going to show you how it handles the corners. Did you feel that? Wasn't that awesome? That's not how you conduct a test drive. What did the salesperson do to conduct the test drive? Who was in the driver's seat?
I was.
Of course you were, right? You wouldn't sell many cars if you were a salesperson who put the customer in the passenger side, right? You're, I think you'd maybe go into a different job, you know, if that's what you do. But here's the challenge for the salespeople who are on this call. What's your test drive? Every organization on here, you have to be able to tell me what your test drive is. And so here's some examples of things you can do to actually create this powerful step of emotional involvement. And here's why a test drive is so important. Matt, when you think about your test drive, you're sitting in that seat. When you finish that up, what was your comment? You're like, all of a sudden, I love this car. This thing handles perfectly. Car salesmen tell us this. We've worked with some car companies. What's one of the first things you did after you adjusted the driver's side mirror and you put the seatbelt on? What was one of the first things you did in that vehicle?
You turn on the radio.
Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
So you turn the radio on, and what you're trying to do by turning the radio on is you're trying to simulate your own experience in the vehicle. Car salespeople believe that just the act of turning $1,000, $500 car stereo can make the difference between whether you buy a $30,000 vehicle or not. That's for men. For women, they say that it's the cup holders. The cup holder can make the decision. For me, when I buy a new vehicle, it's where my elbow goes. Like I can't, if I'm leaning too much, I'm not going to buy that car, right? So the next slide talks about some things we can do in the print industry to create a powerful test drive. Test runs are real easy. I think most people do this where they, you know, okay, let's do a test run on your machine or of your job, right? It can be something as simple as a homework assignment. I want you to read this. I want you to watch this. I want you to have a phone call with somebody who's done this. Here's a case study I'd like to share with you. And it's not me telling you about this. It's you having some skin in the game. You have to do something here. I can give you a free trial, maybe a money back guarantee, you know. So those are some things we can do. But here's what I want you to think about. Here's why it's so important. You have to help the customer get it. They have to go from, oh yeah, I understand, to, oh my gosh, if we did this here, that would make a huge difference, right? I have to put the customer in the driver's seat so that they do it, they think it, and they answer it. Because the key thing is, when I'm educating you, it's logical. When you're in the test drive, it's emotional. And once you make an emotional decision, it's really hard to switch back from that. The key thing here is this is where product experience and product knowledge is going to help you. You don't want to go in and tell, you want to be able to answer. Now, for those of you who maybe are newbies in your organization, not so critical that you need to know all the answers, you just need to know where you can get them. And if you have a product expert either with you or on the phone or whatever, the key thing is you want to ask questions when you're in this stage of what you've learned in the previous stages. And again, that's why discovery is so important. So the ability to be able to say, even to that retailer, you're able to say, listen, I remember when you told me in stage one that this was really important. Here's how we're going to solve this. So what do you think about that? Will that take care of your problem? All of a sudden you're seeing that the solution is, figuring out, right? The last thing is this place of following up on objectives. I see way too many companies that will go, okay, yeah, here's a test run, here's a free trial, and then we don't come back and check up. Matt, I know you guys do this really well just because of some of the creative things you guys do. What does GPA do in a test drive to make that test drive really unique and significant?
Yeah, I love this one. A test run for us, being in materials, is giving people product to print on. But, you mentioned the experience, talked about the car, these different types of things. To us, getting samples should be an experience. These are beautiful materials. So, we put a lot of effort into the look and feel of the packaging you get so that it's an experience when you get our samples. Most importantly, too, following through all those stages. But for the follow-up on objectives, we like to be there when they run. It's watching it happen and being able to handle it right there. So
I can't tell you how many salespeople I know that will send something to a customer and then not be a part of that conversation when they open the package, right? And so whether today you might have to do that on Zoom, but that's okay. Say, hey, listen, can you save? We're going to send this to you, but at 10:40 tomorrow, can we make sure that we have that conversation, right? So.
Yep.
One last thing I want to share with you is this concept of what we call the split, Matt. So we've talked about the start, we've talked about the skip, now this place of the split. So this next slide, has this ever happened to anybody on this call? We have a great conversation with Bob. Bob tells us what he needs. We work through the list of Bob's needs. We give Bob a price, and Bob says something like what, Matt?
I got to go talk to Jim.
That probably happens 90% of the time, right? So there's two questions I want to ask. First off, who's having that conversation with Jim?
Bob is.
Yeah. Why are we letting Bob have that conversation with Jim? And the second thing is we think Bob's at stage 5 or stage 4. We think we're close to a deal. What stage is Jim in?
Jim's probably in 1, like initial interest, maybe in 2, but not much farther along.
Exactly. So our challenge as salespeople is 1, I want to be in that conversation, and 2, I got to move both Jim and Bob along the same continuum. So one of the things we teach is this concept of 3 languages and above and below the line. So I want to show you this slide about the 3 languages. In any organization, we know that there's 3 levels in that organization. There's this level, features and benefits, speeds and feeds. It's the nuts and bolts of how I use what I use, right? Let's say those folks speak Swedish, okay? Just for, to use an illustration, they speak Swedish. They think in terms of 0 to 3 months. The next level in the organization is a VP level. Now, if I'm a VP, I have 2 objectives. You either increase my revenue or decrease my cost. That's the world I live in, and that's what I'm being paid for. And so I think in terms of 6 to 18 months. Let's say I speak Russian. The ownership is Greek. They think market share, market size, and they should be thinking 2 to 5 years out. Here's how big the pie is. I want a bigger slice of it. Now, Matt, what happens if a Swedish speaking person goes into a Russian or a Greek and speaks Swedish?
Yeah, so they push us back down to the level of the language we're speaking.
Most salespeople on this call aren't afraid to go up. They're not afraid to call high in an organization. The challenge is, what are we saying when we have that conversation? And so we like to have people think about a below the line and an above the line conversation. And so if you think in terms of organizations, your below the line folks are your programmers, your engineers, your above the line folks are your owners and your VPs and that. Now, in smaller organizations, I want you to think about 2 sides of your brain. So maybe it's the same person, but they have to think on the right side is all about the nuts and bolts, and the left side is how do I make that happen? And the best way to describe this as a difference is I want you to think about Thanksgiving dinner coming up. Now, this will be a different Thanksgiving because I don't think that we'll see a lot of this, but in the way of the past, you had an adult table and a kids table. The adult table talks adult language. The kids table talks kids stuff. And if you're an adult and you want to go to the kids table, you better be willing to talk about, the newest Barney episode. If you're a kid and you want to go to the adults table, you better be well versed on your politics, right? And so, that's the conversations that are happening. And so there's 2 tips, some tips I want to talk about as far as when I'm BTL and when I'm ATL, okay? So if I'm BTL, this next slide is 1, your BTL folks are working on today or maybe tomorrow. So they're definitely working on quarter 4 and possibly quarter 1. So I have to involve the below the line person. There's no question. They are critically important. But don't stay there. That cannot be your only point of contact because they are in a short-term loop. There are things that are happening in that organization. There are decisions that are being made that they don't necessarily know about. They're waiting to hear what's going on. They're waiting for their bosses to give them direction. Now, here's where BTL folks are critical. They can give you what I call the mechanics of implementation. And I love this concept. It's this place of they tell you how to get it done, right? If they become your champion, they're the one who says, Matt, let me tell you, here's how you get things done in this organization. You need to talk to bloop, 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 Jim, Bob, blah, 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 and here's who you need to talk to, and here's how you need to do it. You want to create those types of relationships with your below the line folks. Make sense? Anything you'd add to this, Matt?
Yeah, we love this one. I love when you say champion because I think that's that's impressive. The idea that somebody's going to help us carry this through. You're trying to solve their problem, right? And as we talked about early on, and the other one, being ATL or BTL isn't better or worse. It's just the position people are in. So
you just need to know that this is the reality of this conversation. And so if we go back to that issue with Bob and Jim, most of the time what we see in organizations is we see Bob will bring us into this conversation with Jim, and as salespeople, we'll say something like, "Great, Jim, nice to meet you. I've been working with Bob for the last 2 or 3 months, and what do you want to know about us?" Here's the overview of what we've been talking about, because really the key is I need to find out what I need to have you sign off on this deal, because we're pretty much ready to go. The reality is your above the line folks want to see this on the next slide. They want to hear you say things like, "This can contribute to lowering your costs by up to 20%. We can save you 3 to 4 weeks of time. This solution is going to lower your risk by 5 to 10 points." They live in a world that has 5 things that they're interested in. And the more we can quantify the exact numbers for those, and we can use their numbers, the more powerful we are from an ATL standpoint. So we teach this concept called Value Star. This is a fantastic tip right here. Think in terms of when I'm above the line. So the thing is, I'm willing to call above the line. So now the place I want to challenge everybody on this call is just think about 5 points on the Value Star and ask questions about these 5 points. Return on investment. I want to learn and I want to understand what their expectations for return on investment are. I want to learn about their time issues, uptime, downtime, what's going on from a timing standpoint. Risk is a huge issue. Risk is that place of when I get an above the line person and I can say, "Listen, what's at risk for you to achieve your objectives for 2021? What are you worried about not happening or happening that's going to really throw a wrench into your plans?" Brand is easy in marketing. Hey, what are your brands? What does your brand represent inside of this organization or in this marketplace? But I also want you to think about not just an external brand, but an internal brand. There are folks in an organization that are, they're innovators. And so the minute I find out what the brand of that person is and what it represents, I want to drill into that. Why is that important? So if you're an innovator, or you're the person who makes things happen in this organization, or you're the person who is able to figure out what we did in the past and how we extend that into the future, that's critical, right? This last piece is this piece of leverage. And we're going to spend a few seconds talking about this. But Matt, any one of these 5 pieces resonate for you?
Yeah, it's so great. I mean, it's a strange time, and all of those things are very important to our above the line people. But
Yeah.
what we saw that was really interesting on the brand side, this is where in times that are tough, people had to be bold and they had to dare. And I think it was really companies that we partnered with that were very successful did things differently. And I think you mentioned it earlier, something. I think you said unlearning certain behaviors.
Oh, Dean said that. Dean was like, we've got to unlearn it all. He was actually pushing his organization to say that there's no more going back to normal. This is all about pivoting, and we got to get out of our own way. I love that, right? And I think that's the challenge. That how do we help our organization, create that brand level, right? So the key thing I want you to think about here in Chicago, we have this place called the Metra, and the Metra has about 20 train lines that go in, and so your ATL folks, I want you to think in terms of they're like a station master in a train station. They're managing a lot of trains, a lot of train lines. Some trains are in the station. They're trying to get them out of the station. Some trains are out looking to come back. Some trains are just getting ready to leave. Our job as salespeople is to go in there and ask the station master, what's delayed? What's on hold? What's pending? What's been scrapped for the last 6 months? What are your dogs that you need to get rid of? And what are your shining stars that you're putting money and energy towards? What are you revamping? And what do you need to get up and running? Now, listen, if I can learn those things, I can figure out how not only I can help you on one train, but I might be able to help you on 4 or 5 trains. That's where the key of leverage is. If I'm an above the line person, and I'm making a buying decision, if 2 + 2 = 8, that's significantly different than 2 + 2 = 1.5. Does that make sense? This place of, I want you to be able to show me how you can not only help me with one train, but you can help me with multiple trains. And so this next slide really talks about the two tables above and below the line. And here's the key strategies to remember. When I'm below the line, I got to be able to show my below the line folks how easy it is to use. Do I have the right features, great support, all of that? Maybe the most important piece is, how do I help my below the line person look good? Your below the line people are either looking to get promoted or to keep their jobs. Both of them need to look good either way, right? So if I understand that, I can be a powerful ally for them. When I'm above the line, there's this place of, how do I help understand what corporate initiatives you're trying to advance? Where are the places where you need to save time? You need to lower your risk. What type of ROI expectations do you if you're going to make an investment in a problem and you're going to say, I'm going to invest $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, what's your expectation of your rate of return? Do you expect to see this thing pay for itself in 3 months, 6 months, 10x, whatever that looks like? What's the competitive advantage you need? And lastly, how do we add value to your company brand? What are the things you're looking at? So if you remember, it's really all about understanding the buyer's process. And so the two places, if this last slide is, I just want to review and remember, your stage 1 and your stage 3 conversations are absolutely critical. Discovery and transfer of ownership. If you focus in those two areas, I think you'll have a lot of success in what we're challenging, in challenging times. And so, Matt, before I go to this last review slide, anything, that's really resonated with you in just this last, what's one of the biggest tips from a, table standpoint, value situation that you think printers need to be aware of?
Yeah, I love this one as we bring it all back and we just really get to this idea of, we've been building the whole time for this above the line conversation where we really need to start to focus more. And I think it's one of those, as I write notes every time we talk, I think that's one of those. And I've always thought, if you need help understanding how to talk to above the line people, my guess is in your company or your situation, you have above the line people.
Oh.
You probably have C-suite employees. You might have a chief financial officer. There's a president or an owner. And if you need somebody else to take a look at where you're at in this stage management, or where you think how to get those questions, you have people on your own team you can go talk to right now to help you understand that.
A Zoom cup of coffee, go-to-meeting cup of coffee with either your existing team members or maybe even one of your best customers. Hey, what problem did we solve for you? Talk to me about how we impacted your time, how we reduced your risk, how we increased your return on investment. Have those conversations from a training standpoint, and they're going to make you much powerful. So we've had a strong conversation today, and I know we've thrown a lot at this group here. It's almost, many people will say whenever we do this, it's like drinking water out of a fire hydrant, right? But the things I want you to remember is, we talked about stage management. This place of your first date and the test drive are absolutely critical. This split and this separation, understand ATL, BTL. Understand energy is all about customers solving problems. This language of the ATL, the value star. Time travel, ATL they think in the past and the future. How do I find the trains? And lastly, how do I get excited about prospecting? Matt, anything you want to add before we go on? I know we're going to be asking some questions, or we're going to be taking questions, but my key right now is, I want to ask the group to just quickly chat in the chat section. Give me one takeaway. Matt, while they're doing this, what's one thing you're going to do differently, or you're going to think about differently because of the conversation today?
Yeah, I'm just focused on the above the line. I think that above the line conversation and working on my questions there on the value stars, my big takeaway. So
yeah. So one of the things we're promising everybody here is, if you go in and you type in the chat and you just tell us what's one takeaway, one thing you're going to do differently, we're going to put you in a raffle. We're giving away 10 of Skip's books. Skip is the founder of my organization. He wrote a great book, Selling Above and Below the Line, and we're going to do a raffle on that. And so just fill it out. We'll keep track of it. Kevin, I think we've got some questions, so we'll take this time. And anybody who wants to stay on, I'm more than willing to stay on for as long as we have questions. So
thanks, Tom. And Matt, fantastic job. If anyone else has questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat feature, and I will relay to Matt and Tom here. One of them, though, Tom, you talked a lot about above the line and below the line conversations. What if you're in a meeting with someone who is an above the line buyer and then a below the line buyer? How do you manage that?
Thank you to whoever gave that, because that's a great question. Listen, here's what we teach folks. If you have one below the line person and one above the line person in the meeting, you speak above the line. If you have 5 below the line people and one above the line person in a meeting, you speak above the line. If there's 650 below the line people in a meeting and one above the line person, you speak above the line. You always, and I'm going to say always with a capital A, you always speak above the line. They are the ones who are making the decisions. Now, your below the line folks can be the stoppers, the blockers. But when they're in a meeting with an above the line person, you do not want to get into technical jargon speak, because your above the line person is going to check out. What I would do, though, is I would say I would have my above the line meeting with all the below the line people there. And then I would say to the above the line person, listen, we're going to start getting into some of the technical data here. You're more than willing to leave. You don't necessarily have to stay in this meeting. And you give them the ability to check out on their own. Because listen, just trust me, they're going to check out regardless of whether you give the ability or not, right? Matt, I'm sure you've seen this, where you have an above the line person and then you start talking and then they start checking their phone, they start answering emails, right?
Right, or they push you back. They push you back a step, right? They're going to come in and they're going to push you back because you're not speaking their language.
So just always start speaking above the line, and then you can always drop down to the below the line conversation. So, Kevin, any others? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
Here's a couple that I think you could expand on. Tim Mendoza says I like the idea of thinking in terms of first date, relatable and easy to recall. And then something a little bit tangential, I'd say, some are considered below the line but have great influence to above the line decisions. So did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I love it. So again, the key is, listen, I'm not proposing at any point that you do not have a relationship with your below the line person. Your below the line people are absolutely critical. But here's what I know happens. If I have only below the line relationships, there can very well be conversations that are happening in meetings that I'm not aware of, where they're making financial decisions. For example, I was talking to a company right now. They're an aerospace company. And one of their objectives in 2021 is to reduce the number of vendors that they have. They have 30 vendors. They want to get it down to 5. Now, imagine if my only relationship is below the line and I'm not aware that that conversation is happening. I'm at risk, right? Now, if my relationship is only above the line, like I'm only talking to the CFO and the CEO, understand that I'm at risk because I've got BTL people who are like, hey, boss, you don't understand. This thing's never going to work in our machines, and so they can block you. My recommendation is you have to have those two relationships rock solid, and you have to move those people throughout the sales process at all times. Your job early in the process is to understand all of the decision makers. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges salespeople have today. It used to be I could talk to one person who was making all the decisions. That's no longer the case. Sometimes they've got a team of 10 people that I need to have a relationship with. And if I'm not using LinkedIn and I'm not using social media, there's a very good chance that I'm not going to be able to foster relationships with all 10 of those. Matt, anything you'd add to that? Because I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think when we talked about that, you used a word that really helps me understand it, champions. So above the line or below the line isn't better or worse. It's just where people are in an organization. So, if we treat the idea of a below line individual as our champion, somebody, again, they know how to get things done was one of the key things I think that you said about that. They're the ones who are going to help us take our influence up the line. We're just talking about speaking a different language at a different point.
Yeah, that's it.
If we have time for one more, Tom, one of the commenters said they really like the question, what's the risk if you do nothing? And you might want to expand on that.
Yeah, so thank you. Whoever said that, I love that. That to me is one of the most powerful questions you can ask. Hey, if you just do what you're doing today, what's the outcome? And one of the things we teach is this concept of what we call a gap chart. And so it's hard to recognize this, but tell me what your goal is. So here's your goal, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If you do nothing, where might you end up? So your goal is here, and what's the downside of doing nothing? Now let me ask you, what's the upside of doing what you need to do? And so you see this, Matt, can you see this? Okay, and I know it's tough but if you can imagine, my sales conversation is now not about my cost. It's about how I'm helping you manage the gap. Does that make sense? So your goal is you want to hit this number. The downside is if you do nothing, you run the risk of maybe losing 25%. Your upside, if you do this, is you're going to be, best case scenario, you're going to be 10 or 15%. Now, here's my solution. My solution is going to cost you X dollars to manage this 25% gap. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I love that question. I think it's critical to have the conversation and have the customer actually go through, what does doing nothing look like? What's that outcome? Because the more they envision doing nothing, the more they go, oh, I don't want that. We've been doing nothing for the last 3 years, and I've been trying to make that change, right? So good. I can keep. Listen, I can. If there's more questions,
we're going to do one more, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Last one. And it'll be a slam dunk for you. You talked a couple times about towards pleasure and away from pain buyers. How do you tell the difference?
Oh, that's great. So first off, just watch the way people communicate. Watch the things that they say, the things that they post. You'll see, you'll hear things. Ask people, when you ask people questions, you're going to be driving towards things like, okay, so for example, let's say, we all know people who buy the iPhone, the very first, so an iPhone 15 is coming out, they got to get in line and buy that. Now, for most of us, we can look at that and go, oh, well, that's a towards pleasure person, right? Because they want the newest, they want the greatest. But here's what I would challenge you. The reality is, for that person, the way that they're wired, they don't want to be that person who's still got an iPhone 6 like me when everybody else has an iPhone 10, right? They don't want to be that person. The reason people are making buying decisions is because they're getting away from something. And that's the away from pain that we're trying to figure out. So one, we have to ask really good questions to understand their pain points. And two, just watch why they're making the decisions that they're making. And maybe you look at the way they've made decisions in the past and you can go, okay, what is it that drove them to make this purchasing decision? Does that make sense? Matt, anything you'd add to that?
No, I'm going to let that one sit. I think you covered it just perfectly. And Tom, thank you so much for sharing with us. I know you've been a big friend to GPA and made a great difference in the way that we approach these things. And hopefully we've been able to provide that here today to our great partners in the print community. And I hope everybody has enjoyed this and found it to be of great value. So we want to thank everybody for coming.
I want to make one statement, Matt.
Absolutely.
Listen, if the folks on this call believe that there is value for us, having additional conversations, we could spend a lot of time on a few of these topics. So definitely, want to make sure that is out there. So, and then our contact information is here. Let's make sure that everybody, please reach out to both Matt and I on LinkedIn. Let's get connected. We'll help you grow in whatever way. If there's any introductions or resources that I have, I'd be more than happy to help anybody. Again, any friend of GPA is a friend of mine. So thank you guys for having me, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. We really appreciate you being here again. Thank you, everybody who stayed with us. And we look forward to seeing you next time we have another great presentation for you. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.